5th and 14th centuries is known as the Dark Ages for a reason. It's an era rife with political rivalries, religious intrigues, and cruel devices used to extract information and cause pain.
China's ancient history is filled with stories of power, order, and discipline, but it also reveals a harsh reality for women. Under strict laws and traditions, women faced punishments so cruel that they are hard to believe. From humiliation and public shaming to horrifying physical torture,
where they would have heard other prisoners screaming, moaning in agony. They would have also heard the torturers and what they were doing.
These punishments were in most cases not about justice, but served as tools of control, showing the rigidly and domineering patriarchal structure of society at the times. How terrible were these punishments? Join us as we reveal to you the 15 worst punishments in China's history that were done to women. Mutilation. In ancient China, one of the most terrifying punishments was mutilation, a slow and brutal form of torture. Women, seen as lesser in society, were not spared from this horrifying fate. If accused of treason, rebellion, or even disobedience, they could face this dreadful penalty. The victim of mutilation practice would be tied to a pole while an executioner cut pieces of their flesh, making sure that they remained alive through the entire ordeal. Women endured unimaginable pain as their suffering was dragged out for hours or even days. To make it worse, their remains were often displayed publicly as a warning. This punishment, meant to strike fear, was cruel beyond words. This form of punishment was later abolished under the government of Mao Zedong in 1949. Keep watching, because what comes next on this list will shock you. Cooking in oil.
500 years ago, death by boiling was a punishment that was widely used in cases of particularly serious offenses such as counterfeiting money.
Imagine being boiled alive. Horrifying? But that was a real punishment back in ancient China, and women were not spared from its horror. Dropped into a big pot of boiling oil or left to cook slowly as the oil heated, women accused of treason or disobedience faced this unimaginable fate. It wasn't just about killing. It was about making a public show of their pain. Hundreds would gather to watch. Their screams were warnings to others. Sometimes the cruelty was taken further. They were placed in cold oil, forced to feel the heat rise as the flames below roared. It wasn't just punishment. It was pure torment. How much pain can one endure for committing a crime? Horsebreak. Picture 4 horses galloping in different directions, tearing a woman's body apart piece by piece. This was the horror of the 4-horse break, one of feudal China's most gruesome punishments. Anyone accused of treason or dishonoring authority could face this fate. Their limbs were tied to ropes attached to horses, while trainers made the animals run, ensuring a slow and agonizing death. Sometimes, a 5th rope was tied to their neck for even more brutality. Public executions like this served as entertainment and warnings, forcing women to live in fear. These punishments weren't about justice. They were cruel spectacles made to crush the spirit in the harshest ways possible. Wooden horse. A woman accused of being unfaithful faced the most shameful punishment ever thought of in ancient China. The wooden horse punishment was designed to strip her of dignity and leave her broken. She would be tied to a wooden horse shaped to humiliate her, with nails fixing her legs to prevent escape. Stripped of her clothes, she was paraded through the streets while gongs and drums signaled her disgrace. Crowds gathered to mock her as she endured public shaming and brutal beatings from thorny branches. Forced to shout that she was a prostitute, her honor was destroyed, even if she survived. This punishment didn't just hurt her body, it crushed her spirit. In a society where a woman's worth was tied to her honor, survival often felt worse than death. Skinning alive. Skinning alive was one of the most horrifying punishment given to anyone back in ancient China, and women were not exempted. This punishment was used for anyone accused of serious crimes like treason or rebellion. They were often subjected to this horrific fate. The process was slow and agonizing, with the victim's skin peeled off in layers, sometimes taking hours to die. Ordinary people were punished with sharp tools, but those from higher ranks were treated more carefully, as officials made sure their bodies were preserved for display. This cruel punishment wasn't just to hurt, it was meant to scare others. Emperor Hongwu's order to skin 5,000 women in 1396 shows how deeply rooted this brutal practice was in punishing women, dehumanizing them in the cruelest ways. Hard labor. Women in ancient China who committed crimes like theft or prostitution faced the harsh punishment of hard labor. Sentenced to work in places like mines or salt fields, they endured long hours of exhausting labor under harsh conditions. These women, often sent to remote areas, were treated like tools to build the state's infrastructure, like the Great Wall, without care for their health or well-being. Many didn't survive the harsh conditions, falling victim to exhaustion, disease, or malnutrition. Hard labor wasn't just a way to punish, it was a cheap source of labor for the state. This cruel punishment continued for centuries, until the government finally abolished it in 1957, citing concerns over human rights. Don't miss what comes next on this list. Amputation. For women in ancient China, amputation was a horrifying punishment. If they committed certain crimes, such as theft or disobedience, they could lose a foot or even both. This brutal practice was used for over 1,000 years, starting with the Qin dynasty. Women were often left with no choice but to live as amputees, symbolizing their punishment in a society that viewed them as lesser. These amputations weren't just about removing body parts, they were about stripping women of dignity and marking them for life. Though the practice ended in 2nd century BC, its practices continued in some other parts of the world. Taliban rebels in the 1990s used this method for execution. It's a chilling reminder of how far society once went to control and punish women. 3 lines of ancestry. Imagine being punished not just for your own crime, but for the actions of your entire family. In ancient China, women could face the horrifying fate of execution of 3 lines of ancestry, where not only the accused but their children, parents, and even distant relatives were sentenced to death. This cruel punishment was used for serious crimes like treason or insulting the emperor. Anyone caught in this web of punishment had no escape. Even if they fled, the ancient system of control made it nearly impossible to escape capture. They couldn't survive without family, and no matter where they went, their ties would catch up with them. This punishment was meant to crush any trace of rebellion. Punishment of the piper. The piper punishment may sound like something from a song, but in reality, it was one of the most brutal punishments in ancient China. Stripped of their shirt, a prisoner would endure the slow cutting of each rib, as if the executioner were plucking the strings of an instrument. The pain was excruciating, and many women were pushed to the brink of death. Hooks were used to yank at their ribs, causing unbearable suffering. This punishment was meant to break the will of the prisoner, forcing them to confess or beg for mercy. For women, the fear of this horrific fate was enough to strike terror into their hearts. It wasn't just death, it was a living nightmare, lasting until the very end. Bamboo torture. Bamboo torture was a horrific punishment that could make any woman's blood run cold. The victim was tied horizontally, with sharp bamboo shoots placed under the stomach or back. Over time, these bamboo shoots would grow rapidly, piercing the body from the inside, causing excruciating pain. This punishment was so brutal that it could take days for the victim to die, with death seen as the only release from the agony. Often reserved for serious crimes like treason or attempts on the lives of officials, it was a reminder of how cruelly women were treated under feudal laws. For those unfortunate enough to face it, survival was nearly impossible, as the bamboo would slowly tear them apart, inside and out. Insects in the head. There was a cruel punishment in ancient China where the head of the criminal was held still, making the person unable to shake it. Then the torturer would place a millipede in the ear. As the insect crawled inside, it would chew through the delicate inner ear, causing extreme pain. This method of punishment was also extended to women. The victim would suffer dizziness, vomiting, and unbearable agony. The horror of this punishment often led to death or insanity. Though it seemed like a mild form of torture, the mental and physical torment was enough to drive a person to his end. This punishment showed the dark ways people, including women, were punished, leaving them broken inside and out. It was a punishment that proved the cruelty of ancient systems. What comes next on this list will blow your mind. Food torture. In a dark, confined space with low ceilings, a criminal would be locked in a crooked position, unable to move. The person would be given only meat and water to survive. Since the diet of ancient Chinese were mainly plant-based food, the tough meat would be hard to digest. Over time, the intestines would stagnate, and the lack of movement would stop toxins from escaping the body. The punishment was designed to break any person physically, and would lead to a slow, painful death within a month. Women were also subjected to the cruelty of this punishment, and it shows how much women were subjected to inhumane methods in the past and were forced to endure suffering beyond reason. It was not just a punishment, but a slow, agonizing end that left the body trapped and unable to survive the cruel conditions. Drops of water. The victim of this punishment would be placed in a cold, damp room, strapped tightly to a chair, unable to move. Above the head, a container of water would drip constantly onto the same spot on the victim's forehead. At first, it seemed harmless, just a drop of water, but the continuous and monotonous dripping would drive the person's mind to the edge. The lack of sleep, the hunger, and the steady drops would break one's sanity. Over time, this small action caused unbearable psychological pain, leading to madness. The torturers found it easy to carry out, as no special tools were needed, just the endless, suffocating rhythm of the water. This cruel punishment was also meted out to women, and it was designed to wear down the mind. It also revealed how the most simple acts could be twisted into forms of unimaginable torture. It wasn't just about the body, it shattered the very soul. Placing in a barrel filled with spikes. This punishment involved placing a person in a barrel filled with short, sharp spikes. At first, the pain was mild, enough to make the person rethink their actions, but if they didn't confess, the torture grew worse. The victim would be dragged by the hair through the barrel, the spikes tearing into their skin, causing wounds too severe to survive. To make the torment last longer, salt was poured into the wounds, intensifying the agony. Worse still, the victim was deprived of sleep. Slowly, they lost track of time and became disoriented. The mind, already pushed to the edge, would eventually break. Even the most hardened individuals began confessing, often to things they hadn't even done. This punishment broke both body and mind, removing any form of resistance from the victim no matter the gender, leaving only a shell of the person who had once been. Tying to a bamboo stake. For women who were seen as disloyal to their husbands or had children out of wedlock, this punishment was used to make an example of them. They were placed on a bamboo stake in the town square for all to witness. This display wasn't just about the punishment. It was a warning to all women about what would happen if they went against society's rules. The woman's suffering was meant to instill fear and discourage others from similar actions. It was a harsh way to keep control, showing how severe and public the punishment could be for women who didn't follow the rules. Given the cruelty of these punishments, what would you have done if you lived in ancient China? Pastor Joel Osteen was about to carry out what seemed to be the most important aspect of his Christian faith. He was moments away from leading Anthony, a young man who was suffering from addictions, into Christianity. At the back was a lone boy whose face was frozen with fear. His eyes were not on the stage but fixed on something no one else saw. With fear, the boy's trembling voice broke the silence. "It's right behind him," he said. Everyone in the congregation was left terrified by what he revealed. It was a Sunday morning. The congregation were gathered and packed to capacity for a special service at the Lakewood church based in Houston, Texas. It was a solemn service organized for people that wanted to be free from sin and every other form of addiction. The hearts of the people were filled with hope as the stage was set for something special. Joel Osteen, the lead pastor, had called on other church workers to be prepared to be a part and to anchor different sections of the program.
You know, we don't understand why these things happen, but we know God's in control.
The service had all manner of people in attendance. Adults and children were all in attendance, as everyone's hearts were set for what was about to happen. Some media outlets were present to capture moments that promised to be transformative. The service started with a high praise and worship session from the choir. As the service progressed, time came for Joel Osteen to minister. The congregation was calm as they listened to his ever-powerful message. His voice resounded with so much energy as he greeted the congregation. "Good morning, Lakewood family. Isn't it a beautiful day to celebrate God's love?" He had already taught on the power of redemption and how important it was for people to have faith in God. After the ministration, the crowd erupted in cheers in response to the message. Joel continued as his smile lightened up the whole room. "Today is a special day, and we're blessed to witness the power of redemption," he said. He ended the service with a call on whoever wanted to be born again and have his or her faith renewed in God. As soon as the call was made, Anthony, a young man who was in his mid-20s and had been battling with addictions and fear, stood up in response to the call from Joel Osteen. His shoulders were a little raised as he slowly made his way to the stage with his hands fidgeting nervously. Anthony took the microphone and said with a shaky but sincere voice, "I have spent most of my life feeling lost." His words seemed like it was caught in his throat. He managed to mutter, "I have hurt people I love. I have hurt myself and felt there was no way back, but something told me to come here today." Some among the congregation erupted in applause, while some were moved to tears. Joel Osteen stepped forward, placed a hand on Anthony's shoulder and reassured him. "That was God speaking to you, Anthony. He has been calling you all along, and today we're going to welcome you with love," he said. It was to be a moment of transformation for him, and one that everyone had looked out for as he stepped forward. The congregation looked at him with a sense of fulfillment of what the service stood for, which was redemption, grace, and the power of God's love. The choir began to sing as melodious songs wrapped the whole room in warmth. The audience bowed their heads in prayer as Joel prepared to lead Anthony through the prayer of salvation. But just as the moment reached its peak, a sharp gasp broke through the silence. What could have happened in the midst of a crucial moment for Anthony? Was it meant to be a day of salvation for Anthony or not? You are about to find out. Right in the middle of families that held hands and sang hymns was a lone young boy of about 12 years old. He was visibly odd and different among the joyful congregation. He was dressed in a faded gray shirt, torn sneakers, and his pale face showed nothing that was to be desired. He quietly sat at the back, a little away from the families, while his eyes scanned the entire stage with so much intensity and nerve-wracking fear. His identity was not known, and no one seemed to know him, at least not at the first sight. Nobody could say how and where he came from. As Joel Osteen was about to pray for Anthony, he looked at the whole congregation and immediately took notice of the young boy's frozen face with his mouth slightly opened. He noticed his eyes were fixed on something no one else could see. What was it that he saw that terrified and shook the foundation of the whole congregation to the core? The boy's eyes looked like he was focused on the pastor, but as he stood, his face pale and his hand trembled. The boy's eyes were fixed on the stage and not on Joel Osteen or Anthony. His face seemed to cut through something invisible everyone else couldn't see. Joel Osteen paused, and his comforting smile faded almost immediately. "Is everything all right, young man?" he asked. The boy did not respond, but instead pointed a shaky finger towards the stage. His voice, which could barely be heard, sent chills through those close to him. "It's behind him," he said. People began to murmur among the congregation as curiosity and tension began to set in. Joel Osteen tried to maintain his composure as he addressed the boy gently. "What do you mean, son? There's no one here but us," he maintained. The boy's voice shook as he spoke again, but louder this time. "No, it's standing behind Anthony. Can you not see it?" Anthony turned around with caution, his face distorted with confusion. "What? What's behind me?" he asked. The boy stepped into the walkway in between the benches, his small body unmoved with fear. "It's tall, too tall, and his face kept changing. It's watching Anthony," he said. Silence swept through the whole room like it was commanded. Some stroked up their crosses while others whispered prayers under their breath. The tension in the air was so strong that it could be felt. Joel Osteen looked visibly unsettled, but was determined to calm the tension in the room. This is the house of God, and nothing evil can stand in this place. Whatever you think you're seeing, young man, I assure you has no power over us. The boy shook his head repeatedly. You do not understand. It is not afraid of this place. It is waiting for him to say a yes. Suddenly, the lights above went on and off momentarily, which led to a moment of serious unrest among the crowd. The big screen behind the stage began to work abnormally. It began to show an object that was not moving for a second before it returned back to normal. That's not all. Panic among the crowd began to spread as whispers turned into frightened murmurs. Anthony stylishly and fearfully moved away from the stage. He was heavily breathing rapidly. "What's going on? What's he talking about?" he asked. The pastor raised his hands and tried to calm the congregation. "Please stay calm, everyone. This moment is one of faith, not fear." His eyes showed a glimpse of doubt even as he spoke. The boy kept focus as he took another step forward. His voice trembled, but he remained resolute. "If he accepts God right now, he'll die. It is not here to stop him. It is here to claim him." The whole room turned chaotic as some fled from their seats and headed for the exits, while some knelt down in prayers to God. Joel Osteen's voice rang out. "Do not let fear take hold of you. We are in the hands of God," he said. The boy's words brought about silence across the room. "It's moving." The boy pointed again, but his finger trembled as he traced a path that could not be seen towards Anthony. "It's right beside him now." Anthony's leg, out of fear, gave out, and he collapsed to the floor with his hands gripping the stage. "What is happening? What is this?" Joel Osteen quickly knelt down beside him. His voice was low but very urgent at that moment. "Listen to me, Anthony. God's love is much stronger than anything in this world or the one to come. Do you believe that?" Anthony couldn't speak as tears rolled down his face. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he said. The boy screamed, holding his head. "It's too late! It's here already!" The lights in the auditorium went on and off again and sent everyone into partial darkness. Silence fell and was broken only by the sound of the boy crying. Suddenly the lights returned as it had begun. It was a miracle everyone had been waiting for. The atmosphere that was oppressive had been lifted as the boy lowered his hands slowly. "It's gone," he whispered with his hoarse voice. The congregation sat there in disbelief of what had happened. Their eyes looked both at the stage and the boy. Anthony was helped to his feet as his voice regained strength after the turmoil. "Whatever that was, it has no power here. God's love has helped us to overcome," Joel Osteen said. Anthony was shaken, but still managed to nod his head. "I still want to do this. I still want to choose God," he said, with a not-so-audible voice. Joel Osteen in turn gave a warm smile as his confidence returned. "Let's finish what we started," he said, still smiling. Joel Osteen proceeded with the prayer of salvation without further delay, and as Anthony repeated those words of prayer, the congregation chorused a resounding amen. A round of applause followed the prayers. The lone boy, who looked visibly exhausted, became calm and sat back into his seat. After a while that service had ended, Pastor Joel Osteen sat back in his office and wondered what had happened. The boy's words kept ringing his mind. He pondered on what the boy had seen and why the room felt so tense. It took him a little while before he could get his mind off the incident, as it was the first time in years he felt so touched and gripped with fear. He concluded that it was a battle between light and darkness, which could only be conquered by a very strong faith in God. In his quest to connect with his mother, Harry admits to seeking help from a woman who claimed to have powers. In the memoir, Harry admits to taking cocaine at the age of 17, saying it wasn't very fun but made him feel different. He also recounts an incident at a party in January 2016 at Courtney Cox's house, where he took magic mushrooms and washed them down with tequila, leading to hallucinations where he spoke to a bin and a toilet. He mentions how Rebecca Brooks, the editor of News of the World, was determined to publish a story about his drug use, describing her in harsh terms. Harry also shares a personal and inglorious episode of losing his virginity in a field behind a busy pub to an older woman who loved horses and treated him like a young stallion.
I am the lady that Prince Harry wrote about in his book, who he lost his virginity to.
With an older woman. She liked horses quite a lot and treated me not unlike a young stallion. Quick ride, after which she'd smack my rump and set me off to graze. Among the many things about it that were wrong, it happened in a grassy field behind a busy pub.
He further details an episode at a bar where, after drinking heavily, he tried to start fights, was thrown out, and later lashed out at his bodyguard, determined to hurt him, but did not receive the reaction he sought. Harry claims that his brother William, and then future sister-in-law Catherine, suggested he wear a Nazi uniform instead of a pilot uniform for a native and colonial fancy dress party in 2005. He mentions that he liked Catherine from the first time he met her, describing her as more of a sister than an in-law and someone he enjoyed making laugh. Harry also shares details from his tours of duty in Afghanistan, stating that he flew on 6 missions where 25 Taliban members were killed. He admits that he didn't view them as people, but rather as chess pieces taken off the board. He adds that the number didn't bring him any satisfaction, but neither did it cause him any shame. Prince Harry's relationship with his father and Camilla, the Queen. Harry shared insights into the complex dynamics between him, his father, and Camilla, Charles's wife. He mentioned that both he and his brother William had agreed to welcome Camilla into their family on the condition that their father did not marry her. However, when Charles decided to go ahead with the marriage, Harry recognized that his father was finally going to be with the woman he loved. Harry alleges that Camilla sacrificed him on her personal PR altar to improve her public image, leaking details of a conversation she had with William to the press. He also claims that Charles and Camilla leaked news of his drug use in 2002 and sent him to a drug rehabilitation center to gain sympathy for Charles as a father and for their relationship. Harry further alleges that William felt tremendous guilt for not speaking up about their father's affair with Camilla, leading to feelings of confusion and torment for William. Harry also accuses Camilla of playing a role in his mother's death, believing she was pivotal in the disintegration of his parents' marriage. He likened his first meeting with Camilla to getting an injection, noting that she seemed bored because Harry, not being the heir, posed no threat to her ambitions. Despite these feelings, Harry acknowledges that his father found happiness after marrying Camilla, and he wanted both his father and Camilla to be happy, even wondering if she was less dangerous when happy. He also mentions that Camilla turned his bedroom at Clarence's house into her dressing room as soon as he left. Harry discusses his father's difficult experience at Gordonstown, where Charles was bullied and almost did not survive, and mentions his father's attachment to a teddy bear, a symbol of the loneliness of Charles's childhood. In the book, Harry reveals that his role as William's best man during the 2011 wedding was not entirely accurate, as James Mead and Thomas Van Straubenzee gave the wedding reception speech. Harry felt this was the right decision, as he feared he might say something inappropriate. He also humorously recounts that he had a frostbitten todger at the wedding, a result of his trip to the North Pole, and was advised to apply Elizabeth Arden cream, which reminded him of his mother. Harry also alleges that William was tipsy on rum just hours before his wedding. He recalls that after breaking up with Chelsea Davy, he briefly dated Caroline Flack, but press intrusion quickly tainted their relationship. Additionally, he denies rumors of a relationship with Cameron Diaz, highlighting that while Britons are among the most literate people, they are also highly credulous when it comes to believing tabloid stories. Harry shares some personal and candid moments leading up to his relationship with Meghan Markle. On the day of their first date, he recalls being out at sea for a racing competition on a boat with no toilet, which led to him wetting his pants. He also admits to regretting searching for Meghan's sex scenes on Suits.
In his new memoir, Spare, the Duke of Essex admits that he once looked up Markle's sex scenes from the USA show Suits, and that he now regrets doing it, writing that he needs, quote, electric shock therapy to get the scenes out of his head.
Harry confesses that during a confrontation with Meghan, he became disproportionately, sloppily angry, which prompted Meghan to tell him she wouldn't tolerate such behavior and suggested he needed therapy. Harry mentions that his brother William urged him to take a closer look at his relationship with Meghan, believing it was moving too fast. However, Harry felt that their mother had played a role in helping him find Meghan. He also writes about Meghan being asked by Queen Elizabeth II to select a tiara from her private collection for the wedding. However, the Queen's dresser, Angela Kelly, initially refused to lend them the tiara, citing the need for an ordnance and police escort to take it out of the palace. After several attempts to contact Kelly, she eventually handed over the tiara, but with what Harry perceived as a clear warning in her eyes. Let us know your opinions in the comment section below. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Click on the next video displayed on your screen. You will enjoy it.